So some mid to high-tech solutions, we get a lot of calls for these. These are for deaf and hard of hearing. This particular one is called an Alert Master, but they're alert systems, and a really good alert system has redundant alarms. It has not only the loud sound, it'll do lights, vibration, and all of the above. And so they come available. They can notify someone when their alarm goes off. There can be a baby monitor, burglar alarm, carbon monoxide, doorbell, motion detector, smoke detector, anything. So there's these are really, really important if you ever have a student that is deaf or hard of hearing in your classroom, to go in and think about that. If they're in the classroom, how do they know when the bell rings? How do they know if there's a fire alarm? Anything like that. And then these are different communication devices. The ones on the top left are eye gaze, and so the person can actually use their eyes, and as they look at the screen, whenever they dwell on a certain button for, let's say, 3 seconds, you can change it to however long you want, then it clicks on that letter, and then they can set them up with communication software in there so that they can actually type phrases, and you can even set these up to do environmental control. So they could open their windows, they can turn on the TV, they can change the channel, all by using their eyes and gazing at the screen. And then another one on the right side is called Direct Select. So it's a different type of communication device where they touch the screen and it talks for them. And then the bottom one is the one that a lot of people, very, very popular. It's the iPad with Proloco to Go on it. And it's probably one of the most universal apps for communication. And it doesn't mean it's the most appropriate all the time, but it is the one that's most universally used within the school systems. What we find is that it's not always implemented correctly, or there's not enough training for the IEP team, the SPED teacher, the speech-language pathologist, whoever's working with the student, to really know how to implement it and manage it. So we get called quite a bit to go in and help with that. Then some other really cool new things on the market. The one on the left side is called the GPS Smart Sole. So you can use it with any shoe, and you take the sole of the shoe out and put the Smart Sole in it, and it has GPS built into it that works with an Android or an iPhone. And then you can basically track where the person is. I've threatened to put this in my husband's shoes just so I know when he slips off to Lowe's and Home Depot to buy more stuff that he doesn't need. The other one is called the Pocket Finder. There are tons of these out on the market. Some of them are like, there's the Pocket Finder, there's the Hip Key, there's Tile. There's several different ones. Each of them basically do the same thing. They're a small wearable device that you can, put on somebody's clothes or in their purse, and then you can track where they're at, or they can hit the button and say, I'm lost. Here's my GPS coordinates. This particular one, this Pocket Finder, is pretty cool because it actually tracks each time you're wherever you're going, and you can set it up. Let's say we have a student that is working out in the community. It's part of their transition, and they're supposed to go from the school directly to the coffee shop and back, and during a certain time. You can set it up that if they go outside that area, then you get notified, and you can also look and see where they're at each time. So we've used quite a few of these cognitive safety aids with students with Down syndrome, students with Alzheimer's, or not students with Alzheimer's, people with Alzheimer's, students with autism, you name it. So they're pretty handy, and there's more and more of them coming out on the market right now. Then some other things that are really exciting that we've been working with are some different home monitoring systems. And just recently we started using the Alexa. It's from Amazon. And so Alexa is, the best way to describe Alexa, if you haven't seen one yet, is it's like Siri, but with superpowers. So Alexa is very, she has personality, more personality than Siri on your iPhone does, and she can actually work with, she can work directly with your iPhone. So it looks like a speaker, and you can say to Alexa, you can say, Alexa, put milk on my shopping list. And she will come back and she'll say, okay, Misty, I put milk on your shopping list, and it immediately shows up on my phone. Then you can say, Alexa, turn the lights down. And if you have the Hue smart lights in the room, she will change, she can dim the lights. She can change the temperature on your thermometer. Basically, there's so many devices out on the market right now that are what we call off-the-shelf devices, meaning we can just walk into Target or Best Buy or the Apple Store and pick them up. They're not necessarily quote-unquote assistive technology, but they're doing things that make them now assistive technology. Just a side funny story, we helped an older gentleman down in Kenai. He got Alexa, and we were helping him with it. And now Alexa, he refers to her as his girlfriend, and he literally visits with Alexa all day. So he'll ask her what the weather's like, and then he'll ask her, you know, what's going to be on TV that night, and he'll just have conversations with this little cylinder speaker, which is kind of funny. The other thing, we work with quite a few people that use like smart things, or that's what's up on the right side there, and it's a home monitoring system. But a good example is we have a gentleman that we've been working with for several years, and he has cerebral palsy and recently had to have his whole spine fused. So his dexterity and his mobility has diminished quite a bit. And he lives basically alone. He has a personal care assistant that lives next door to him. But when he has somebody come to the house and ring the doorbell, he has no way, first of all, of opening the door for them, and second of all, knowing who's on the other side of the door. So each time he would have to call his PCA and have them come next door and open it for him. And so with this device, he actually, when they ring the doorbell, he sees through a small video camera on his iPhone who's on the other side of the door. So it's a huge safety precaution. There are tons of other things that he's able to do with it, but that was one of the main things, is that he was really concerned about being home alone, and he had no way of knowing who was coming up to the door. So he also uses Alexa to change his temperature in the room or anything. I did talk to a teacher a couple of weeks ago that said she was using Alexa in her classroom with a student that had autism and would really got very focused on what the weather was going to be like today, what the weather was going to be like tomorrow, what was the weather going to be like next week, and this would continue to go on and on and on. So she's actually using Alexa as a way. He comes in, asks Alexa what the weather is going to be like tomorrow, and then he uses his communication device to announce it over the PA system to the rest of the students what the weather is going to be like. So very creative way of using Alexa to help a student. So the next step, we're going to talk about how do we assess students for their AT needs. So here there are so many different assessment models that are out there. Kentucky University has one. Georgia Tech has a model for assessing students, and there's Wisconsin. It's called the WADI, and it's very lengthy. If you go to print it out, I think it's like 60 pages. Any type of assessment that anyone is going to do on a student, it really, the core of that assessment, it needs to follow 4 basic steps. So the first one is, it's called the SET model by Joy Zabala, and so you can look up more information. I put her URL there. But the first thing is, she calls it student, and we changed it to person. But the very first thing to think about is the person. You have to look at the individual to know who the person is and get as much of their background information as possible. And then the second thing we always look at is what the environment. In what context are we going to need to accomplish their goals? And we need to be aware of their environment that they would be working in or need the assistance in. And then the third thing is the task. What is the task, or what is that goal that they need to accomplish? One of the most important pieces to this puzzle, and unfortunately it is the one that so many people lose sight of when they're doing an assessment, is what actually is the task. And then the last thing to think about is the tools. What technology would help them overcome any barriers that they may be having? So finding the best tool is the most difficult part, but you really can't do that until you know who the person is, what environment they're going to need these tools in, what are their tasks that they need to do, and then the last thing to think about is the tools. At the core of any assistive technology accommodation, we are trying to match the individual to the technology. So we need to start with the person and their needs, then move to the technology tools. Often people want to start with the technology. They get that shiny things syndrome, where there's a new exciting piece of technology that they've heard about, and so that's the first thing that they go to, and they try to make it fit with the person. And this is really the round peg in a square hole approach, and it won't work. It'll just lead to eventually technology abandonment. So there are 6 key points to a good AT assessment. First thing is, it's got to be a team process. It's probably one of the more difficult things that we deal with, especially when we're doing a school assessment, is that getting all of the documentation ahead of time so we have time to read through the IEPs and any previous report, so we get to know who the student is. And then kind of getting that information from all the team together is really hard. And especially here in Alaska, because we have that distance factor to overcome all the time. But it's not a one-time shot. It's an ongoing team process, and that's critical for people to understand and know. Secondly, it's a dynamic process. It changes as the student learns new skills or their needs evolve and change. It's not just the product, the device, or the software. It continually will change as the student grows or the circumstances change. And then third, it's a system of devices and services that work together to provide those appropriate accommodations for the student. So we really have to have not only the device or the tool, but we have to have the services that follow it. And then fourth, it's an adjustment. It requires new skills. I think probably the best analogy I can give that I've seen so many parents and educators finally they get that aha moment is when I'm training them on how to implement communication devices for a student that's nonverbal. It takes over 4,200 hours of parents, adults, siblings, child care providers, anybody, talking to a child before they normally can start speaking around the age of 18 months. That's a normal child that learns to speak because we speak to them. However, I just see it time and time again, people installing a communication app on an iPad and they hand it to a student that experiences communication deficits and they assume that the student just knows what to do with it. Or they'll say to them over and over again, just touch the screen and use it. It's your new voice. Here's your voice. Just touch the screen. But for it to be really successful, we have to model effective communication, including how to, quote unquote, talk with that device to a student that experiences a communication disability, just as the parents model to a small infant and toddler how to use their voice to learn how to talk. This all takes so much time, and it's new skills for them to learn. And unfortunately, time and time again, students just handed a piece of AT, and we forget that they need time and training to learn how to adjust and how to obtain those new skills so they can use the AT to be more successful. And then fifth thing is, it's a step towards independence. It's our job as their education team members to show them how the AT is going to make them more independent. I'm always surprised at just how many educators or service providers would act, and this is funny, it sounds funny, but it really happens a lot. I hear they would rather sit next to a middle or high schooler and read content to them than to open the door to independent reading by using something like text-to-speech software. So I've had people say to me, after I've done an all-day training on text-to-speech software and how it can make their students more independent, I had a teacher come up to me and say, that's really cool, but I don't think I'll ever use that because my students like me to sit next to them and read to them. And I just thought, how many 17-year-olds like to have somebody sit and read to them instead of being able to do it independent? So then the sixth is, AT is not always solved with an iPad. I think this is getting better, but there was definitely about a 3-year period where every student with a communication deficit of any kind was handed an iPad. And definitely I'm a huge fan of Apple and iPads, and by all means, they are revolutionary tools for accessibility, but it's just not always appropriate for all students that experience a disability. Because we have to remember, just because students are born in a digital age, that does not mean that the digital tool is the most accessible one for them. So I'm going to stop just for a second, just to see if anybody has any questions before I go on.